So recently, I've been looking into rural, small town America and its church health. And I got to tell you, the perception that it's going to be rural America that brings America back to a sense of stability, both politically and religiously, this does not seem to be what's panning out. It seems to be struggling right now. Rural America is not going to be our salvation. It needs us to turn things around. It needs us to save it. Let's talk about this. Welcome to the TLDR Christianity podcast. If you'd like to support the podcast, you can do that by giving to the Patreon or the Give, Send, Go, both linked below. If you'd like to contact me, you can do that at tldrchristianity@gmail.com. That is also linked below. Before you contact me, though, if it's a good thought, put it down in a comment. If you're on a platform that allows comments, please put a comment there. I'd like it when other people can see, other people can interact with it. I love when conversations started. Yes, I know places like YouTube are not the greatest for real conversations, but when we can have some positive engagement, it's a really helpful and useful thing. Now, what are we talking about this week? Well, like I said, we're going to be talking about rural America. We're going to be talking about the small towns that exist all across this beautiful country. How are they doing? How are they doing? Because, again, there's this perception that they're the conservative heart of America, that they're the Christian heart of America, and it's going to be from these small communities that we see a pushback against the nonsense that's happening in the bigger cities, and we're going to return to a better country politically, a better country religiously. That's not what's going on, though. That's not what's going on. There are a lot of things that polls and surveys will not show you. They cannot show you. And when you start doing the research into, okay, how are the churches doing? How are the churches doing? You start to see concerning things. And that's what I've been doing recently. So I was curious about my own region, where I am. The area that is culturally, economically linked to my home. I want to care about the people that are immediately around me. So I started doing research, and pretty rapidly I went, okay, I need to do some baseline things. I need to just find out how many churches there are that are active, open, kind of what are their affiliations, their denominational backgrounds, how's their general attendance, how's their general health, are they a struggling church, or are they, a nice, lively, active, stable church? Are they without a pastor right now? What is going on? What is the state of the churches around me? And just any church that calls itself Protestant or evangelical. We're going to keep it super broad so we can just get a picture of what's going on. And now I live in one of the big cities here of 26,000 people, plus a few neighborhoods outside the city limits. So we're not driving out of the city. We're just driving to connected neighborhoods, but they're just not part of the city border or this, boundary yet. Plus, we have a college here, somewhere between 8 to 10,000 on campus. That fluctuates a decent amount, and there's some conflicting numbers if they're all here in the city or if they're in some of the extension campuses. But 8 to 10,000, many of those are residents, at least half are not, so we can add at least 4,000 more, plus at least 1,000 people outside the city. We'll say 5,000. It's going to get us over 30,000 people. We're just going to use 30,000 for a quick number. Quick number. There are 20 churches in this city. Might be one or two more. There's a couple that I cannot confirm that they are existent. And I'm going to need to do some more on-the-ground research to confirm if they are actually closed or not. I just haven't done that yet. But 20 churches, 30,000 people, 1,500 people per church. That's the slice of the mission field that each church would have to impact. And that's just for the immediate city. That's not the surrounding area. Let me tell you, the average church attendance here is not 1,500. It's not 500. It's not 200. There are, that's a crazy amount of unchurched people here. There's a crazy amount of unchurched people. Or people that don't even have a church, kind of in general. We need more churches here. City of 26,000 people, college, 30,000 people. We're not doing good. And that's to say nothing about the state of those churches, where at least half of those churches, you couldn't make a case that they're actually biblical, gospel-believing, preaching churches. And that's not even being judgmental on them. That's the openly pro-homosexual churches. The churches that have openly preach a false gospel. That's to say nothing about some of the other churches that have concerns, red flags to them. Those are just the ones that are blatantly off the rails. So you might have 10 okay churches out of 30,000 people. Well, now each church has to deal with 3,000 people to carry their own weight. And the attendance among those churches, being generous, using a couple attendance numbers from a couple of the bigger churches that I believe, based on my research, are inflated, you could generously say that those 10 churches are averaging 150 people. That's 1,500 people. 1,500 out of 3,000? That doesn't even align with the number of people who claim to be Christian. That's significantly lower. And if I wanted to, again, I could nitpick through that a little bit more. We're trying to be a little bit more generous and conservative here. So that's kind of our baseline. 5%. 5%. Compared to the more around 25 to 30% that generally say they're Christian. And I can tell you, even when you add in the 10 bad churches, you still don't get to that 25, 30%. And this is the big city. So how are the little rural towns that no one knows their names that exist around me, how are they doing? Well, not good. Very, very few of them have more than one church. We're talking towns between 500 and 1,000 people, kind of that range. And they might have, they'll all have an area around them that's generally double what's in the city. So 1,000 to 2,000 people is sort of the town we're talking about. A proper town, and then rural farmland or logging country around it with scattered houses and mini communities, little villages of like 10 to 15 houses. And they usually have, very few have more than one church. If they have more than one church, almost always it's a United Methodist Church or an Evangelical Lutheran Church in America church. Two extremely off the rails denominations. And before you say, oh, well, you're just assuming that specific one is, no, then I go look at the church. I investigate the church and find, city, middle of farmland, city, town, 1,000 people, again, probably about another 1,000 in the area, 2,000 people. yet constantly is a contender for state football champions. Uh, that's the type of small town America I live in. A tiny, tiny nothing towns that no one knows exists, yet they football powerhouses. Um, and in Idaho, that actually matters because there are a lot of small towns. So there's a lot of competition. But yeah, look at them. So it's a tiny town, 1,000 people. They have a Catholic church, so we're not even going to count that one. They have a Evangelical Lutheran Church in America church, and they have a community church. Well, the community church is just this one in particular previously was a congregational church long time ago, and then just as other churches closed or there were other just migrations of people, they brought them in to the point where they just became a community church because they're a mix of, there's some former congregational people there, Lutheran people, Methodist, Assemblies of God, people that probably you just call Baptist, so on and so forth. They're an absolute mix of a church, and I love this church, okay? I have preached there, been to their services, and you can see it in their service. Their service is such a mix of little traditions, but it's it's sweet and wonderful. I love that church. But they are something that doesn't have a strong identity outside of just we exist and we're here and we survive. So they have kind of their own little unique identity, but it's not really rooted in anything much. It's fragile is what I'm saying. But that town, the Lutheran church there, you go, okay, well, it's a small rural town. But yeah, they're affiliated with the ELCA, but they're probably not that bad. Yes, they are. They are 90% as wacko as your rainbow flag waving church, ELCA church in a major city. They are pro-gay. They do not preach the Bible at all. They promote social justice openly and unashamedly. This is a town of 1,000 people in rural country. And then they have the community church. Okay, well, they got one good church. That 2,000 people, they got one good church. That's something. Technically, that's better than my city's doing, right? Well, we got a problem. The community church is without a pastor. And thus we start to see a pattern develop constantly all across tiny, tiny little churches and tiny, tiny little communities. They'll have some sort of community church, Bible church, nondescript, non-denominational church that's been there for a long time and has a similar story to that community church I was just talking about. And without a pastor. I have found so many that are without a pastor. So many. And they're struggling, finding some way to keep going, but they're not really... They're without a pastor. They're without consistency and consistency of leadership. They're tiny. So even what they have there is still a little bit shaky. Yet they're great, wonderful communities. Oh my goodness, that's where pastors should want to be. They should look at these churches, they should see the community, and they go, oh my goodness, these people are the people that are here are committed to being here. They want to be here. These are great people, and we could do something so good here. But these aren't where pastors look nowadays. Seminary graduates look. One, because you're not going to find just a job posting for these churches. Like everything, it's rural. There's this old school expectation of we just kind of put the word out and it'll get around. Sometimes it's posted some places and you have to go hunt and find it. I've found ones that you would never find unless you were actively researching this to try and figure out if they're looking for a pastor. So we got a couple problems. Yeah, this town has a church and it's a decent church, but it's without a pastor. So it's kind of it's stunted at the moment. Or they have that United Methodist Church that the community even looks at and goes, blah, 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 blah. And there's murmurings of, well, maybe we should, if there was enough. This is something I found multiple times. Essentially, they go, if there was another church, we'd go there. But because there isn't, we're going to go here. Even though we have serious problems with it. Well, that does something. I mean, you raise your kids in that. It doesn't matter how often you go, yeah, okay, I know the woman pastor just told you that the story of David and Bathsheba is about David raping Bathsheba, and that's the point of the story, and then because of that we need to believe all women, but that's not really what's going on here, and I need to correct you. No. Your kid getting told that from an authoritative position is going to start to believe it. When they're told, oh yeah, racism's this huge problem, and you're racist because you're white and you have this white privilege. If they're hearing something like that, now I'm not saying that's going on at every one of these churches. I'm just saying if they hear something like that from a pulpit, from a position of authority, they're going to believe it. This is one of the dangers of speaking from the pulpit outside of God's word. You have to be very careful when you're standing up there what you say. Because you say something rashly, people are going to trust you. They should be able to trust their pastor. But if you make this compromise, we're going to stay in this church because it's the only church in town, well, you're sending a conflicting message to your kids, and then when your kid goes off to college, you shouldn't be surprised when they're not grounded in their faith. And again, this is a pattern we see over and over again. So we have basically 3 different options for these small towns. Single community church that might be decent, but there's a 50-50 chance of looking for a pastor. Single church of a compromised makeup, some degree or another, not necessarily fully heretical, but just not preaching God's word, some degree of wishy-washiness, egalitarian, some degree of liberalization, if not fully liberal. Just, we're going to accept all these other views. We're going to accept that people believe in evolution inside the church. We're going to accept that people deny the miraculous in the Bible, or deny the authority or the literal meaning of Scripture, or so on and so forth. Oh, well, we don't have to believe that because that's just that was just a metaphor for people at the time. God wrote this book. He gave stuff to people at the time, and what he gave to them is what he gave to them. What's in God's word, what's in the Bible, is what God wanted us to have, not those people. He gave those people what they needed at the time, and then certain portions of that were kept permanently in a book for us, for all people. If not, then God's a really bad communicator. And I, for one, believe that God is a perfect communicator. He is perfect, after all. So we have church that is some degree in need of some degree of support. Whether that's just another church to kind of come alongside. They've got a pastor, they're doing okay, but another church to kind of come alongside of them and minister with them, help them, support them. There's a church, but it's some degree of liberalization, or you got multiple churches, but there's only one quality church and the others are liberalized churches. And okay, maybe that's just my region. Maybe that's just around me. I wanted to test this because this was a pattern. Dozens of small towns. Dozens. And again, the pattern holds relatively true in the big cities of this region as well. Big cities. There's a city of 30,000. My city, again with the college, about 30,000. And then another 2 cities together, twin cities, that are Together, 60,000. That's the big one. And then I think the next biggest after that's like 5,000. Before you head north and you hit an actual big city. But yeah, holds true basically in both places. And none of these are matching the numbers of claimed Christians for this area. It's not matching the number of people that claim to be just Protestant in general, not matching the number of people that claim to be evangelical specifically. It's not matching. So we've got a lot of people that are claiming to be Christian, but are not connected to a church at all. We've got a lot of struggling, dying churches. We've got a lot of churches that are teaching people ideas contrary to the Bible, or just aren't really raising them up in the truth. So what do you expect? Yeah, these rural areas still overwhelmingly vote red. Do you think that's going to continue, though? If the church attendance, the number of churches, church attendance, and the quality of the churches are all going down in these small towns, why do you think that's going to be the solution to the problems America faces, politically or spiritually? It's not. It's not. Especially if you have not listened to last week's episode on neo-paganism, how our country became neo-pagan, or society became neo-pagan. Go listen to it, because this is really a follow-up to that largely, because that's the problem we're seeing. We're seeing people raised in the society, indoctrinated by schools in these small towns that are voting red, but they're thinking in a completely different paradigm than Christianity. They're not looking at reality. Even if they claim to be Christian, even if they go to one of these compromised little churches, they don't think biblically. And a lot of polls and studies will tell you that. They'll tell you how, oh yeah, only this certain percentage of people who claim to be Christian believe the Bible is God's word. Only a certain percentage believe that Jesus died on the cross. Only a certain percentage, so on and so forth. Now, okay, is that just my region? Is that just my region? No, I went around other places. Midwest, very, very similar to here. If you don't know, I'm in North Idaho. So I was looking at parts of North Idaho, and Eastern Washington. And no, Eastern Washington is not Washington. It is overwhelmingly red. Very conservative farmland. So we're very similar to the Midwest. Large open fields, a farm with little towns dotted distantly among it. So it was easy to compare that. Apples to apples comparison, same exact thing. They're going to have a church. They're going to have a Catholic church. They're going to have one of three, if not all three. Catholic church, Methodist church, Evangelical Lutheran church. Sometimes you will find, with the Lutherans, sometimes it'll be Missouri Synod or one of the others. But it's still pretty rare. Sometimes there'd be other affiliated Methodist churches. Still pretty rare. Then you find it, a Baptist church, Bible church, community church. It was the same sort of thing I was finding here. In fact, I was finding more towns without a church in the Midwest. I was looking through like Nebraska, Kansas, Iowa, different places, kind of scanning through. It was easier to find places, small towns without churches. Zero church or a Catholic church. Again, it was a pattern. So I kept going. Do I even need to say that the Northeast is the same? I don't think that one would surprise anyone. That the notoriously anti-Christian Northeast would have a very similar trend among their rural communities as well. Now, the South is different for two reasons. One, it's the South. The South is always different than the rest of the country, especially when it comes to Christianity. That does not mean it's healthier. It does not mean it's instantly healthier. There are some healthier aspects, but you always need to double check things to figure out exactly what the difference is. Because here's the second thing. Southern small towns are way different than most of the rest of the country, especially Midwest and the West, where we are a younger regions, where people are in the big, large, open farmland. So you have nothing. You're going to have, a house with each farm, but when the farms are hundreds of acres, that's not a lot of people. And then you get to a town, condensed, boom, town. And then nothing, until finally, boom, another little condensed town. The South is different because of its geography, because of its age, because of just cultural things with how it developed. So you'll find it way more spread out. There's fascinating things when I look at something, and if you were to show me like the size of a town in much of the South, I would go, oh, I expect this, and this to be there. And then I look at it, I'm like, there's a mall there? That's like a town of, what, maybe 5,000 people at best? Well, then you do some research and you find that there's just a lot more significant population density around it. So when it comes to looking at their small towns, you might find more churches. You will. But you need to try and compare relatively the same population densities to one another. And once you start to do that, it becomes much more similar. You will find the same thing. You'll find more Presbyterian churches. That was actually something I found fascinating. Less Presbyterian churches than I would have expected in a lot of places, especially where I am. A lot of Presbyterian settlement while the inland Northwest was being settled. But Presbyterian churches were incredibly uncommon among the small towns. Very, very few. But in the South, you're going to find a little bit more Presbyterian churches. Every town is going to have 1 to 2 Baptist churches in these sort of small populations that I'm talking about. Once you expand that a tiny bit, you're going to find Baptist churches all over the place. Now you go, okay, see, they have more churches. And you're still going to find your Methodist, your Catholic, your Lutheran. And generally, you're going to be a little bit luckier with finding ones that are not United Methodist, Evangelical Lutheran. And again, you still look at each one, you go, okay, where's each one at? Are we going to fully reject it? Or are we going to say it's got serious problems, but it is still different? And I will say, there are more churches generally in the South, but the trend holds true. What do I mean? Well, again, when you compare it to the number of claimed Christians to the amount of churches that are there, and just look at their size, look at some of their social media, get a rough estimate from that, you can get it pretty good. You can get in the ballpark, and that's all I care about. You can get in the ballpark of what their attendance is. You find a lot of these churches are just tiny. The South in particular is much more willing to have a Baptist church of 15 people, Baptist church of 20 people. And, you look into it and you find all the history and, oh, well, this one formed because these people were upset about this, or this, this was a Southern Baptist church and the American Baptists came in, and all sorts of things. It's fascinating history. I love local history. It's truly an interesting thing. But you find the same sort of thing. Again, you're not going to find that density of population. It doesn't match the number of people that claim to be Christian in the region. It doesn't match sort of the perception, expectation. You still got to talk about the quality of these churches, and just because it's a Baptist church doesn't mean it's not, it's above scrutiny. There are a lot of really bad Baptist churches. So you can't just look, oh, look, there's 7 Baptist churches, so we're not really going to look into this. No, look into them, and You're probably not going to get to count all seven in this sort of generalized count that we're doing. Um, there's problems. There are problems. Again, when you start to look at the per capita, the the amount, the number of people per church in a region, you start to find alarming things in the countryside. They're not doing better than the big cities. In fact, quite often, it's the big cities that are actually doing better when it just comes to raw numbers of churches, even when you start to be a little bit picky. Why? That's where the money is, that's where the people are, and this one is something else. You'll find, I know this tiny bit anecdotal, but I think you can confirm this. I believe that most of you have seen this as well, especially if you live in a more rural area. People drive in a half hour or an hour to the big city to go to a bigger church there. Well, when they're driving way over there to go to a church, they're taken away from a church in that community. Suddenly that community has 1, 2, 3, 10 families less to support its local church. And that's where you get these community churches. Just as every other church is dying, everything's contracting, these people go to this one place and go, maybe we can keep this alive. And they usually can for quite a while. But there's going to be compromises along the way if it isn't brought back to a nice, solid, healthy footing. So what is my point with all this? Look, if we want to make true, lasting change in this country, that is only going to come through the gospel. Only Christ is going to be able to break through the conditioning that people have being raised in this neo-pagan culture. He's going to be able to do the fundamental changes that are required to take someone from a anti-truth position to, okay, truth exists. So we got to get these people saved, and then they're not just going to vote red, they're going to start to vote biblically. Now, I have problems with how Christians vote. I don't think we do it with our Bibles in front of us. I think we do it way too often out of fear. We need to be principled voters, not people who vote out of fear. Oh my goodness, if I don't vote, the other side will. Okay, they're going to do what they're going to do regardless. If they don't get right now, the political far left, which we're not even talking about the liberals anymore, we're talking about the radical progressives and openly Marxist people. If they don't get their way, they're just going to riot. They're just going to start a revolution. It's frankly what we're seeing them start to do right now. So if you're going to be afraid, you need to be afraid of them whether they get elected or not. But we don't vote from fear, we vote from a position of principle. And when we do that, we can call our elected leaders to enact better laws and keep their promises. Because we're focused on that, the positive, who we've elected, what we're holding them accountable to, what we're trying to build against. Now, when we get people saved, when we build up a small town, a local community, by getting better preaching into it, getting a good solid church into it, seeing people saved, seeing the percentages of people actually attending a good Bible-believing, Bible-preaching church go up and start to impact the community, you're going to see larger changes. They're going to make it more robust when it comes to elections as well. Giving your life to Christ has implications. Someone who's truly Christian is not going to be supporting abortion. Unless they're in an extreme degree of rebellion, but I don't know if that's truly possible. I'm not going to say it's not, simply because I'm not going to make a salvific judgment, but pragmatically speaking, I don't see how it's possible. You're going to see people, the people outside of Christ, the people that have been raised in a neo-pagan culture, are more and more going to go, maybe there are times that abortion is okay. You know, it's not impacting me. Why should I care about it? So on and so forth. Why? Because they have no foundation for truth. They have no foundation to justify the value of human life. They have nothing. We need to be evangelizing rural communities. Small town America needs us right now. We need to be just going crazy planting churches in rural communities, supporting those churches, really training men up to pastor and lead rural communities, to not abandon churches, small rural churches, in favor of going to a bigger church. Move it on up. No career pastors here. We need pastors who marry their church. Marry their church. View the commitment to a church as a covenant, just like they would view the covenant of marriage. I'm going to bind myself here. I'm going to bleed for this church. I'm going to, this is now my home, my flock. I'm going to care for them and have this commitment. This is where we need to be putting our biggest evangelistic and church planting efforts. Small town America, rural America. If we don't do it now, we're going to see, people like to post electoral maps of all the red counties and these few big city blue counties. You're going to see it eventually. I'm not saying it's going to happen in the next election, not even in the next 10 years, but eventually, as Christianity gets more and more replaced in these rural regions, you're going to see that map change a lot. A lot. We want to see souls saved, and I want to see our country do better. When our country does better, everyone benefits. But we need to be saving rural America, preaching the gospel, planting churches, strengthening the churches that are already there. We need to get in there, and we need to get in quick. Now, there are organizations that do focus on rural churches. There are not enough. And the reach that they have is not great enough. We need to be doing more. If you know of any good organizations, send them my way. I'm curious. I want to learn more about who is out there and active right now. Who is out there and active? Again, I know some. I'm sure there's more. It wouldn't surprise you, but the ones that are dealing with the rural communities are a lot harder to find. They don't have the budgets. They're not generally as flashy and out there as the big organizations that are focused on cities. Cities get a lot of money. Rural communities, the perception. Oh, well they're already so much more Christian than the cities. That's not holding true. Maybe somewhere it's holding true. I can't find it, though. Can't find it. Dozens and dozens and dozens of small towns. I can't find it. Anyway, I would love to hear your thoughts. I would love to hear your ideas. How do we encourage Christians to care about their local community, first and foremost, care about rural, small town America, care about strengthening churches, creating partnerships with churches, planting new churches, being willing to look at, like a town like mine, city like mine, and go, we need 10 more churches here. We don't need a single church planted. We need 10 churches here. And that's still, if we had 10 churches, we got them to 50 people a church, which is a very statistically healthy number. That's approaching church averages, particularly when you take out the top 1%, the mega churches. That's approaching the average, and obviously takes time to grow. 10 churches, 50 people, that's only 500 people. That's not a huge impact still. 10 churches wouldn't make a fundamental impact. It would make a significant impact. It just wouldn't fundamentally shift the town. So much more would be needed. But then you look at the small towns here, and how is it this bad? So I'd love to hear your thoughts. I want to hear a little bit more from you. We can make a difference. Identifying the problem is the first and most important step. Motivating people, coming up with plans targeted towards your area. Every area is going to be different. And executing on them is what we need to do. Again, I would love to hear your thoughts. Let me know what you think. If you want to email me, you can do that at tldrchristianity@gmail.com. I hope this has been useful. I hope this has been helpful. God bless you. And remember, God's been so very good to us, so go bring glory to his name.